Okay, I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Me too.
Excellent. So I think all of you know, because you got the invitation from us, that Brendan Eich is the inventor of JavaScript. So we're really excited to have him here to tell us what this thing that we're all now using is all about. And Brendan, I guess the thing that really fascinated me when I heard was that you actually did this, like, invented JavaScript, created it in 10 days. Is that a fact? And why 10 days? Why were you not given longer?
Sadly, that's true. It was 21 years and 2 months ago, a long time ago, at Netscape. I had been at Silicon Graphics, and Netscape was founded by Jim Clark, the founder of SGI, and Mark Andreessen from the National Center for Supercomputer Applications at my grad school alma mater, the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And Andreessen had done the Mosaic browser, and he and Clark got together to do Netscape. In the first year, I knew some SGI people who tried to recruit me, and foolishly, I turned them down. I made up for that by coming in the second year when they really tried to recruit me by saying, come and do a programming language in the browser. And they were sincere, and they used the research language Scheme, Guy Steele and Jerry Sussman's Lisp dialect. It's a very beautiful language, not really complete in the sense that if you see it used in industry, which it is, there's always extensions and non-standard pieces you need. So I'm not sure Scheme would have worked, but I had no chance of doing Scheme because when I got to Netscape, they already said, oh, we're looking at this language from Sun called Java, so maybe never mind. And the only way that Mark Andreessen, who really still believed in the idea of JavaScript, which we called Mocha at the time, and Bill Joy of Sun, who was a champion on the Sun side, he's the one who signed the trademark license in late 1995, for which he was despised within Sun, of giving Netscape the right to call it JavaScript, kind of a marketing scam. Making it a sort of a sidekick language or a little brother language was for me to build a demo in 10 days to show at an all-hands meeting that there could be a language in the browser that loaded quickly and you could instantly use to compute HTML or validate the field, the data in a form field. And that I did. I did that in 10 days. I have many regrets, which cannot be fixed, because as it often happens in the Valley, that demo was considered done, and it shipped. There were actually some other changes I made later that I regret more because I got early adopters sort of whining for things, but I won't get into that. That was my fault too. The main thing that I think was everybody's fault was the idea that there should be a language in HTML. Mark Andreessen was very clear that you should just be able to write the code in your page, right? And this is easier said than done, but what he meant was it should be interpreted, as was pointed out earlier. It should be very fast to load. It should be accessible to beginners, amateur programmers, graphic designers who know a little BASIC from their Apple II, 15 years earlier. It should be a language for the masses as opposed to Java, which you have to write, a class that wraps the main program. You have to run a compiler. You have to know what types are. And unlike, TypeScript and Float, at that point, Java did not even have decent local type inference. So you had to write types everywhere. It was like painful. People call it a bondage and discipline language or something. Java was not going to be for the masses ever, and we knew this, and that's why Mark and I and Bill Joy supported JavaScript. So yeah, 10 days.
So you write this thing in 10 days that is supposed to be Java's little brother. Could you imagine, like 21 years later, that it would have displaced .NET and Java and Flash and everything else? I mean, was it like what goes through your mind when you see that kind of adoption of this thing that you built?
Well, two things. One is it was not clear how far it would go, and I was concerned it would die, so I kept working on it throughout 1996 and 97, and then I went off to found Mozilla.org with Jamie Zawinski and other people. And at that point, I'd taken JavaScript into international standards body called ECMA International, and Microsoft had worked in earnest to standardize it, and I knew that it had gotten out early enough, that it had gotten its sort of DNA into the browser in a way that Microsoft couldn't remove and put Visual Basic script. So I managed to save everyone here from this being finvbs.io. You wouldn't want that. And that was enough for me, and I thought, okay, JavaScript's going to be around. It's still kind of a sidekick language. It's considered slow or annoying. People do pop-ups or those scrolling messages in the old status bar at the bottom of your old browser in the 90s. At some point later on, after working on Mozilla, which was built on a framework similar to Electron that was JavaScript programmed, it was like the web. It was XML, but it was close enough. I thought, wow, we really have something here. And I saw things like XAML in Microsoft's early .NET. I saw the Flex language for Flash. And I thought, these guys are late to the party. We did this already at Mozilla. Now we just need to restart the browser market, get other browsers to cooperate on standards, and standardize this, and then we'll have what we have with Electron. That took about 15, 16 more years. But it happened. The web was considered insufficient for rich internet clients. I remember hearing this, rich internet applications, RIAs. IBM was kind of our Dutch uncle in the early days of Mozilla when we were struggling to keep Mozilla alive against sort of Netscape's supremacism. And then as Netscape went down and AOL laid everybody off, we wanted to make sure Mozilla got spun out so we could do Firefox. And IBM kept telling us, oh, the web can't do rich internet applications. JavaScript just isn't fast enough. And I took that as a challenge, and I knew about the research that went into the V8 engine and other modern engines from the Self project and the company called Anamorphic that Sun had bought. I did due diligence on loan to Sun from Netscape. So I knew that that wasn't necessarily the case, and I kind of ignored IBM's advice, which was good, because they also told us to be an enterprise runtime, and Firefox would have died if we'd done that. But yeah, I've been surprised along the way, but I guess my point is I've also persevered based on some combination of stubbornness and insight into the basics of computing and the research literature that say that you can have a language that a lot of people use, and it's a valuable thing for all those people, and you can put it down as being the kid brother, the slow language, but there's no good reason why it can't be optimized, and that required perseverance, and that required stubbornness. So I've been surprised, but less so because I keep working on it.
Nice. So you're now working on a new project, the Brave browser. So tell us, what the problem is that it's solving, and also if you could, is this a problem that exists in financial services? Is this relevant to this community?
Okay, so Brave is a browser, but it's more than a browser. If you think about all your data, especially when you think about those annoying, I'll say adverts because I'm in England, UK, where you have annoying adverts that might actually be spying on you or even putting malware on your system, that's a big problem, and it's not going away. So ad blockers are rising. There's a sort of chaos in the internet because of the publishers feeling that ad blockers punish them, so they must punish the user back by making them turn off their ad blocker or pay for content. There's a fair point there that publishers need to get paid, and advertising is used in the main. But advertising has gone through this third-party ecosystem where you can't even be sure who's putting the ad on your page as a publisher. You're lucky if the quality is good and it's not annoying, and if you're unlucky, it's actual malware. And I think this is a huge problem. That's big motivation for Brave. But I also saw that this could be a problem for regulated companies and companies like Sony and Pixar, because they have lots of employees who use browsers daily and have to be able to browse much of the internet. They can't just use a small subset of the internet or use an intranet. And so they're all using secure connections to sites that have ads, and there may be a threat to them too. And we can do other things with Brave in these enterprises like data loss prevention, but that's an extra value add we're looking at as a startup. We're really about the mass of people who use browsers, give up their data for free, or for a good social website, or maybe a good search engine. But all those things have become less good over time, and the data is also being kind of run away with by the third parties I mentioned. So I think one of the things that we should try, and this is Brave's motto, is we should keep your data on your device and study it there. There's plenty of horsepower. We should realize value from those studies, just like the cloud powers do with their great AI in the cloud. And we should try to do things that make publishers money, make the user money. So we're even going to say one of our brand values at Brave is to give par revenue share between us and the user, which is why we use Bitcoin under the hood to drop money on our users. That's a lot, but we're not just a browser. We're like a new approach to getting your user data safe and getting your fair share on the web. And we're just getting started. I'm excited about it.
Very cool. So you mentioned Electron a couple times, and I was fascinated when I met you that you've actually built Brave on top of Electron. And I think we talked about how OpenFin is now also built on Electron. So what was it that made you make that decision, and how's that experience been for you so far?
So I'll be completely candid. I think it was a positive thing. It was better than the previous version we wrote last summer into the fall. We had a fair sort of engineering bake-off between the Electron version and the previous version of Brave, which we never released. And Electron won. And as somebody said earlier, Electron has, I think Colin said, you have like Microsoft employing somebody in San Francisco to work on it. You have a bunch of people at GitHub. You have Slack. So there's finally this community doing something very much like the old Mozilla runtime, which ran our XML language, except it really is using the web. It's using React, it's using JavaScript, it's using the best of the modern web. And so we decided in this bake-off to use Chromium on the desktop, laptop sort of machines. And we needed a front end, and we needed all the affordances Electron gives us, and we happily chose it because it won in this bake-off. Then we found out things like the sandbox was turned off in the WebView process. Security, got in the way of using NPM. This was not a good choice, but we fixed it. And I'd like to get those changes upstreamed. I fear that there are, again, being totally candid, there are Electron-based apps that have code vulnerabilities because of the lack of the sandboxing. I don't know what OpenFin's doing about it. But I think when you're in the browser wars, as long as I've been, you really get serious, as the Chrome people did, about sandboxing, and you don't turn it off just to have some happy, fun NPM requiring of modules in every possible JavaScript context, including the one that loads untrusted JavaScript from third parties. So with that bit of qualification, Electron's thumbs up.
So I'll answer your question. So we also took our time evaluating Electron and just making sure that it was the right choice. And the security vulnerability was for sure one of the huge red flags. Unfortunately, it wasn't as simple as just flip it back on. Yep. So one of the things that we did to ensure security and to prevent this third-party sort of like download of code unverified at runtime was to essentially completely lock down Node in Electron, right? I think some of you may have seen an announcement we made this morning with Node Source. So the Node Source team you heard from Joe McCann earlier is going to now be working with us to make it so that instead of eliminating access to Node completely, which is for sure a way to make it more secure, but it also eliminates all the good stuff that you get from Node, we're going to actually make it so that you can access it, but you can do it in a safe way that's permissioned and really conforms to the requirements on financial desktop. So yeah, it's not an easy job, and for sure it's not the core focus of the folks at Electron. But we also have a policy of upstreaming everything that we possibly can. So.
Cool. I'll just say, if security seems complex, remember in the Matrix when Morpheus gave Neo the choice of the blue pill or the red pill. So the problem with JavaScript is you have to be Morpheus, and you have to make sure you're not being blue-pilled by Metamorpheus, who's putting you back in their matrix. And so whoever runs first, whoever controls the environment really matters, and that's why sandboxing has been so important for Chrome and Electron.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the future, because I'm sure there are engineers sitting in the audience here who at some point over the last decade or decade and a half made the Java choice, they made the Flex choice, they made the .NET choice and the Silverlight choice, and maybe all of them. And I think a lot of people, are feeling gun shy and saying, well, how do we know that this isn't just the next in a very, in a series of these kinds of things where there's going to be something else that will displace it in the near future? What do you think about that, and what gives you confidence, if you have confidence, that this thing has legs?
So I've seen both sides, because I actually, in order to restart standards bodies after Firefox came out, I partnered with Macromedia, then Adobe, who was working on a variant of JavaScript called ActionScript in the Flash player, trying to merge that into the standard. Didn't work out, but it got Microsoft excited, and it got Google back in play, and it helped improve the state of play in the standards body. And there was nothing wrong. I still to this day am blamed for the failure of that standards effort and maybe the failure of Flash, which Steve Jobs actually killed. Thank you, Steve. Because it's not on mobile, and therefore it's just inevitably not the growing place to go for a runtime. But in its day, you could do a lot with Flash. The browsers weren't quite there on. I could see how to make JavaScript fast, but in fact it wasn't as fast as ActionScript, partly because people had to write down the types, but the programmers using ActionScript were coming from the Java world and they were used to that. So I have respect for these different runtimes. I have respect for Java, but there's nothing like the web. It's the only universal runtime that has multiple big company vendors, 100 billion market cap total vendors among them, bigger now, I've lost track of Apple, who are cooperating in order to compete. And the reason they cooperate is because all the developers out there will say, what's the best engine, or do I have to make it work in Safari? Okay, Safari better improve their game. And the vendors respond to this. When you had Java from Sun, Sun was not always the best caretaker for Java, I'll say that. Neither is Oracle. There are some longtime people working there who've done well by Java, and Java's gotten to be a very nice language in its own right, and the runtime is great. It hosts multiple languages. It's a polyglot virtual machine. Adobe, not the best steward of Flash Player. I'll just leave it at that. It's a security nightmare. And I remember even like Microsoft.NET, very well done by Anders Helsberg, and somewhat reverse engineered by the Mono project by Miguel de Haza. Mono never really had the same performance, quality, or profile. It was always a little different, maybe a little slower. So until you get to this magic of this web standard world where nobody owns the web, it's multiply implemented by really fierce competitors who do a good job, and the standards keep evolving due to competition, which went away once. I had 95% share before Firefox. Until you get to that, it's hard to actually bank on one of those proprietary runtimes. Now, is Electron a proprietary runtime? Well, it's got GitHub, Microsoft, Slack, others, Brave, OpenFin. So I think we can always fork it. In the new world of GitHub itself, you can take the code if you need to, and we're carrying patches. I don't worry about proprietary so much there as like, will we get our sandboxing fixes upstreamed? And we should talk about that. I think also, I saw in the notes, HTML6 was prophesied. I don't know if there will be a 6. The whole idea of this major version where you can break compatibility doesn't work on the web. The web just keeps growing, and the bad old stuff, including some parts of JavaScript I'd rather forget, they may fall into disuse, and maybe eventually you can get rid of them. In the meantime, you use a linter, you use a transpiler, a compiler. Life is good, and the new engines are really fast at the common code, and the old funny code kind of withers. And that makes me think, HTML5 was a huge achievement, getting Microsoft back in play, and then Google Chrome was required for that as well as Firefox. And there's still all sorts of, I wouldn't say mischief, but miscoordination around HTML in the various standards bodies that govern it. But that party, as long as it keeps rolling due to developers using it and pressuring the vendors, and the vendors not becoming monopolies, I think that will be a safe bet for a portable runtime.
When did you start using the term always bet on JavaScript?
I think that might have been in 2010 at Capital JS when Dart was, or maybe it was 2011, because Dart was, when did Dart rumors leak? Google was trying to do a language they thought would kill JavaScript. And I told them it wouldn't work, and also that they'd want to compile it to JavaScript so they could have it work on Chrome and other browsers that didn't have this new Dart language. And they didn't listen, and eventually, after $100 million down the drain, not really. They still use it, but it's only in their servers. It's not in Chrome even, and it does compile to JavaScript, which means JavaScript needs things like big integers and 64-bit numbers. It really does. And I would just wish the Dart people would help put those into JavaScript sooner, because we'd have a better world for both Dart and JavaScript, but we didn't. And so I was kind of fed up, and I said, I stole a line from Wesley Snipes, one of his lesser 90s movies, Passenger 57, where it's kind of a silly scene. He's having this sort of phone conversation on a plane from the cargo hold kitchen with the bad guy, Bruce Payne, and he's like telling him off because Wesley's clearly the badass who's going to win, and he says, always bet on black, after asking if the bad guy plays roulette. And so I said, always bet on JS. It's not that JS is the best language. It isn't. It's not that it was designed to do all these things it's doing now, but it has been evolved to do them, and we cannot replace it. Dart experience with Google's might flopping as a replacement shows that. You can't really replace our DNA. I hear neurons, biologists tell us, evolved twice, once in sort of jellyfish and later on in animals that became mammals. And you know, God bless the jellyfish, but there were things before JavaScript that could have been the one true language for all this portable runtime work we're doing. It was JavaScript. It was that guy, it was me. It fell on a bunch of us, not just me now, but a bunch of good people in the committee and on the engines to carry the torch and not throw away that investment that everyone's made and make it better. And that's why I say all's bad on JS.
So can you tell the audience a little bit about WebAssembly and also just, you know, we have non-technical people here as well. Like, why does it matter? You know, how does it relate to JavaScript? Is it going to make JavaScript faster? Like, you know, what can we expect from it? And is this something that's available now? Is it, you know, when is it going to become a reality?
Sure. So a funny thing happened on the way to fast JavaScript. People, Alon Zakai at Mozilla Research and others started deciding that they could actually translate C++ code to JavaScript and not laugh because it could actually be made to run really fast. And at the time, you had things like the Flash player, which had a similar compiler for going from C++ to the ActionScript language. And it could go pretty fast, too. And Google was doing things like native client. They were saying, we want to make a C++ runtime where you compile the C++ to some safe binary code and it runs really fast in, you know, Chrome, and maybe other browsers will adopt it because we'll open the source up. Once again, JavaScript won. It was just sufficiently powerful, even if somewhat crufty DNA that could evolve and get the job done faster across browsers. And so what happened was people were compiling C++ to JavaScript, getting really good performance. It was a subset of JavaScript. At Mozilla, we figured out what that subset was. We call it ASM.js for assembly language. It's kind of a homage to the old days of programming assembly language because it's like a very definitely typed version of JavaScript where you write little shift operators and things to essentially typecast values back to machine types. And because of the way those typecasts are generated by the C++ compiler, I'm losing you guys, it always runs fast. It doesn't ever get into a performance problem. It doesn't ever have a garbage collection pause or one of these just-in-time compiler pauses. That caused Microsoft to sit up and take notice, and they said, hey, we want to make that super fast in our engine. And by the time Mozilla and Microsoft did that, I think Apple was stealthily coming on board. They're always very, you know, secretive. And Google had a fight between the JavaScript team, the V8 engine team, and the native client team I mentioned. And I heard there was blood on the ground after, and the V8 team was victorious. So they all said, you know, once again, always bet on JS. Now we can take this ASM.js subset and give it a proper, concise binary syntax. So you don't have to load all those function keywords, you know, gzipped, whatever. It's still going to use too much memory. You can parse it faster. It's a separate skin for JavaScript that's faster to load. And then, as we have two skins, two surface languages for these virtual machines, the portable runtime that these various vendors provide, we can start to evolve the WebAssembly version to be even more powerful than JavaScript. It can do things that JavaScript can't do. It can do threads. It can do things that native code really needs to be fully native and utilize all the machine resources. And beyond that, it could even grow affordances for dynamic languages like Ruby and Python to run really fast if compiled to WebAssembly. So what I'm painting is a world coming soon. WebAssembly support is coming into the nightly or canary builds of browsers this year, where you'll have the option, if you run a compiler, you know, it's not just a fast reload, unless you use Webpack, but it could be. But a lot of the game developers have a big code base, millions of lines, and they are used to running a compiler. You run a tool and you get a bunch of bits, and those bits load fast, but they load into the same engine that we run JavaScript in, and everything works. The DOM is there. You know, if you're using threads, you're kind of going to have to be careful. That's on you. But JavaScript can be happy on its main thread. It doesn't see threading. It doesn't see race conditions or deadlocks. That's where we're going, and that is actually where Java wanted to go. That's where, you know, people since the 60s have wanted a universal VM, and I had no idea that I was going to be the creator of this thing in 1995, but that happened.
Yeah.